All right, so let's talk about web services. So web services, as you might be familiar with, is being able to expose behaviors and data at a particular URL endpoint, at a web endpoint. So that we could map a particular URL pattern that is going to be handled by a server to execute some logic, to operate on some data, and then respond with some data. And it's a very good mechanism to be able to expose all sorts of operations on data. And we're going to take a look at some of the best practices on how is that we can come up with a syntax of those URLs and how it could be used to map to a data model, right? So it's a very good way of exposing a data model that is being hosted by the server, and then being able to operate, navigate through the data model, and then be able to execute operations on it. So first of all, we'll need to create an actual server for this. Right now, the server that we're using is a Node.js server, which is hosting our client-side application. Right? It's giving us just a placeholder to host the static content, the HTML, the CSS, the JavaScript. That's all the server's doing. Right? It's not really providing any middle tier or any data structures. It's not providing any data whatsoever. But now we're going to have an honest-to-God server that will provide behavior, will provide data manipulation. Right? So let's create the server side of our application. We've been working mostly on the client side of our application. Let's see, where are we? Let's go to webdev and 2018 and fall. And whiteboard. We might have already started the lecture server Java. I'm not sure where we were with that. I'm going to start it from scratch. So let's start it from scratch. It'll be Spring, the Spring command line that you were asked to install early on in the course. I'm just going to copy it here. This says initialize, create a brand new application, and we'll call it whiteboard server Java. Probably let's add here that this is fall 2018. So that's going to create a boilerplate application. I'm going to import it from the Spring Suite IDE, but you can use you can also if you prefer IntelliJ, that's fine as well. And let's see, let me import it. We'll say import existing Maven project. We'll browse to it, and we are under here. Done in WebDev, 2018, fall. I believe it's, let's see, it's this one, yes? All right, there it is. Just to make sure that this is up and running, we can create a, already created. Oh, is that not, that's not it, right? It's this one. There we go. Source, main. Just to make sure that this is actually up and running, let's create a web app directory. And let's create an index page here, just to make sure that this is working. So index.html, and let's put some bogus. Let's see, this is the whiteboard server application, fall 2018. If we go into that directory, whiteboard fall, we can build the project, Maven clean install. That's going to package everything into a jar file, which we can then run from the command line, or we can run it also from the IDE, your preference. So if we run, we can run it from here, jar, and it builds a jar file inside of the target, and it's that's the one. Not sure if I already have something running and listening at that port. All right, so this says that it's listening at port 8080. So let's hit that. 8080 index.html. So that's whiteboard server application fall 2018. So that's the server side application that we're going to be using so far. Okay. All right, let's get started. We have the environment up and running. We compiled it, we ran it, we created an index file. Let's create our very first web service. It's a Hello World web service. So to do that, we're going to create a dedicated directory where we're going to put our services. Now, for this magic to work, you need to put all your source code under a particular package. Right? Notice that it created for us this package here, com.example.whiteboard fall 2018 server Java. We can rename that, right? We can rename it to whatever other package. And in there, this is the entry point to the application. Right? This is what Spring Boot is famous for, just having a single entry point, and in one line of code, you have an up and running server, that it can already host an application, HTML, CSS, or JavaScript, and services. Very, very powerful. Anyway, as long as you're within this root package, a lot of the magic that we're going to do today works. If you're outside of that package, you would have to do additional work. Right? You would have to register the services. You would have to register a whole bunch of other things. But as long as you're inside of that package, everything is registered for you automatically. So let's create under here another package. So I'm going to add to the existing package. I'll call it services. All the web services are going to be under this particular package. Okay, including the service that I'm going to create now. It's going to call Hello World Service. There's our Hello World service. Right now, it's not really a service. Not until we annotate it with a couple of incantations. We'll say that this is a REST controller. It's part of the Spring framework, REST controller. And this immediately tells the server that this is going to declare certain URL endpoints that are going to be made available to the outside world. Right? So for instance, I might say here that I might want to return a hello. And this returns a hello world. Right? And I want to expose this to the outside world, perhaps by if a browser hits this with a GET, right? I want to map it to the following URL. Meaning, if the URL if it comes to the server as /hello, I want to return hello world. Okay. All right. So we can recompile this and rerun it. So we can do Maven clean install again, and then run it again, or we can do it from within the IDE. All right, that's okay. Looks like it's running. So there's our application. So if we hit it with hello, it comes back with hello world. All right, everybody okay? Nothing magical, nothing exciting about that. But at least it's the point I'm trying to make is that we have mapped a particular URL pattern to a particular executable, which is doing something very trivial of just returning a string. Now that string could have been a computed string. I could have concatenated other strings based on some logic, some very complex logic. I might have gone out to the database and doing some really complex query, and based on that query, I might have calculated this string. So it could have been a fairly complex algorithm, right? That might have come back with just hello world. Nevertheless, let's keep it simple still. So we did a get hello world. A couple other things, we can parameterize the executables so that if we provide parameters in the URL, perhaps we can parameterize the behavior, right? So let's try to do that. Let's try this this other hello. Let's add. This creates a different mapping that says that this URL pattern that starts with hello, but is followed by something. Right, we'll instead of executing hello, we'll execute this other one, hello, say hello name. Okay, and we can parameterize it and say that it takes an argument. It takes an arguments name variable, which is going to be mapped to the path variable, the variable that is inside of this path. So what this is doing, these curly bracket is declaring a placeholder. Right, meaning you can type anything in there and it'll be mapped to this placeholder. The placeholder can have a name, whatever name you want to give it, and then you can parse it out from this placeholder. Placeholders have a name, so parse out that placeholder with that particular name, and then give it to me as an argument to the parameter of this function. I can then internally use it to calculate dynamically whatever output you want it to be. So let's do path variable. So add path variable allows me to configure the argument to this. All right, so let me stop it from here. Instead of running it from the command line, we can instead do it from here, from within the IDE. We can take the demo application and run it as a Java application. So now this is going to run inside of the IDE. So this would allow us to step through the code, put breakpoints, and debug on the server side. So as query come in from the client, we can step through and say, well, I want to see what with this variable is coming. Is it even getting here, right? Which is nice. And most IDEs support debugging from within the IDE. In particular, STS, right? This particular IDE. All right, so let's try it out. So if I say hello, Alice, it comes back with hello, Alice, right? Or if I say hello, Bob, it comes back with hello, Bob, right? So I'm basically parsing out the field here from that particular URL. Again, nothing major. Everybody okay? All right. All right, let's keep going. So path variables, we can pass in the arguments and then calculate it. We can also take in parameters two ways. One is through as part of the path. Notice that Bob here is part of the path. Right? So we refer to this as a path parameter, a parameter that is part of the path. Another alternative is to provide parameters as part of the query string, right, where you might provide a name value pair that can be passed as a name of a variable and then the value of that variable. That's an alternative. Right? And the question might be, well, which one would you use? Would you use a path parameters or would you use a query parameter? Okay? So we'll come back to this a little later. Let's look at the mechanism first. Right? How would you retrieve values from a query string as opposed to a path parameter? So as part of the same say hello, let's extend the example. Let me see. We had this. Yeah. So let's add a couple things here. Let's add instead of just a name, we'll add another variable part of the function. So this same function, right, has this path variable already. Has a path variable already. We're going to add an additional parameter to it. Okay. And what this is going to do is that it's going to say, hey, this you're going to parse it from the path. Whereas this message, so this name, you're going to parse it from the path, and it's part of the path. Whereas this message, you're going to parse it from the request string, or from the query string, not part of the path. Right? So anything that's after the question mark is a query string. Right? Notice that it's not part of the URL pattern. So you wouldn't do something like message equal message. Okay, so that's not part of the URL parameter. Right? Anything after the query string is actually ignored by the server to do the matching of the URL pattern. Right? So don't there's no need to do that. This is going to be ignored. Right? Here, presumably, we're expecting that there might be a message query, right, a part of the query, and the value, the name of the variable will be message, and then the value will be whatever the actual message is. Okay? All right, so let's try it out. Let's restart the server. Let's restart the server. Oh, we didn't actually do anything with it, did we? So let's see. What do we do with it? So name. Hello. Let's return that. Let's use that. There we go. And we'll have to restart the server. Yes? No? Maybe? Hello? Are you doing something? Oh. All right, so let's try it out. So there we go. That's hello, Bob. And then message Dylan. There it is. So the Bob is being parsed from the path parameter, whereas this one is being parsed from the query string. Make sense? Now notice that if I don't provide the query string, it gives me an error, right? The server said, I tried to parse the query string, but it wasn't there. Okay. So you could make these optional, right? You could say, well, there should be a request parameter called message, but maybe it's not there. If it's not there, I don't want you to blow up, right? So we could make this a little more robust by saying that the name of the query variable is name, and then additionally say that it's required is false. I mean, if it's not there, don't worry about it. Don't parse it. It's not required. Don't blow up. Okay? But if I don't say anything, by default, it's required. Okay, so if we restart, and now this time around we don't provide the message, then it won't blow up. Okay, so let's there it is. So it's null, right? You didn't give it to me, but if I do give it to you, then it would be whatever value is. Then it's Dylan, right? So it doesn't blow up if it's not there. Let's see, what else? So path parameter, path variables. You could instead of being simple strings, you can have fairly complex pieces of information. It could be it could be an entire Java object, right? So like for instance, it's just a simple message. So let's create here on our project. Let's create a little simple object. So let's create a new class so that this will be not just a plain old string. So let's put it on the models. So models would be a nice package to put anything that has to do with us maintaining some kind of data, right? Data representation, and we'll call it message. And the message can have. Let's paste that in there. It will have a default string, text called text, and a date that returns the current date, right? And presumably this also has a setters and getters. So let's do the setters and getters here. So select all, and we'll generate all the setters and getters. Why is it doing that? I don't know. My indentation is all broken. All right, so there's a message, and so from my hello world service, I could create yet another query that says return to me a message. Right, so let's do that. Oops, I've copy. There it is. So if I say /message, this is going to return a message. So let's import message. Yep, that one. Get message is going to instantiate a new message that has a default text and a default date. I could create it and configure it if I needed to. So let's restart the server. And if I go here and ask for message, it comes back with a JSON object, which is very convenient, right? Because that's how I want it. I want it already formatted as a nice JavaScript object. That's the default configuration. That's the default formatting is JSON. It used to be that the default was XML, but it has since fallen out of XML has since fallen out of favor a bit, since most clients are now written in JavaScript. It's very convenient that the data is being already provided in the format that we need it. The names of the fields of the JSON object is based on the names of the fields. So text and created at. That's where it gets the names of the fields. Whereas the values are based on the data type. Okay, so if this were an integer, then this value would be an integer. Right? And this object, this Java object, could be as complex as you want it to be. Right? It could be an object within an object that has arrays of objects. It could be as complex as you want it to be, and it will convert it for you as a JSON object that contains JSON objects that contains arrays of JSON objects, all mapped. You have to be careful when you have in Java you have circular references where an object might have references to other objects that might have references to the original object, okay? Which in Java is okay. It won't give you there's no issue. But when the mechanism here that tries to map the Java world to a JSON world, it'll go into an infinite loop, right? So it will start at the parent. It will navigate to the child, and from the child, when it tries to convert the child, it'll navigate back to the parent, and it'll go into an infinite loop. We'll see how to handle that in a minute, and break the loop. But just so you be cognizant, you would get a very long request here. It says this has been a Stack Overflow. All right, very good, excellent. So we have our basics. Excellent. So let's move on to post.